Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Roger Gilbert reporting for all our magazines, Milling and Grain, International Aquafeed, and Pet Food Industry, International Pet Food. And we are in the company today of Karim Kurmaly, and he's the lead at Protopia. Protopia is a new single-cell protein that is being developed by dsm-Firmenich. And we're going to have a little discussion about what impact that's going to have for our industries, including the food industry. But first of all, let me welcome Karim. Karim, welcome.
Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Karim, you've got some exciting news there, I understand.
Yes, we certainly do. And we're quite, I would say, after the success of Veramaris, which is our algal omega-3 produced from algae in Blair, Nebraska, using our biotech platform. We're now, I would say, very pleased to come to the world with Protopia, which is a single-cell protein using a similar biotech platform. And we hope to commercialize this very soon, hopefully first half of next year.
Well, that's the announcement, really, isn't it? That the timeline for when this might reach the market.
Exactly. So, and we've already done quite a lot of preliminary work, I would say, with customers, both in the food sector, in the aquaculture sector, in the pet food sector. So I would say we've got a lot of traction and a lot of interest from off-takers with this particular product.
So if we talk about the food industry specifically at the moment, before we get into the animal and aqua side, will this have a big impact, or is it sort of like maybe sort of for people who can afford to spend more on their food and have a different selection in the supermarket?
It's a very good question. The story of Protopia was actually we embarked on this as a replacement for fish meal. So our cost of goods was designed to be very low. Basically, very complementary to Veramaris, which is the replacement of fish oil. So whilst we've been focusing on COGS, which is cost of goods sold, we designed it in such a way that not only can it penetrate or be useful for the aquaculture industry and the pet food industry, but because of its functionality, which I can talk to you about later, we understood that actually it would be very interesting in the food industry as a meat alternative and as a dairy alternative. And that's where we stand at the moment. So for the food industry, we have a very low carbon footprint protein, 70% full of the complementary amino acids, and it's non-GMO. That's the beautiful thing. And it's approved for use in the US and in the EU. So it could actually fit into quite a few food vehicles, particularly with customers who are looking for meat alternatives and dairy alternatives. Yeah.
Well,
that's where we've been working on, I would say, considerably.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's in support of the, I guess, the cropping industry and the animal industry in providing sufficient protein for the human population.
Yes, it contributes dramatically to obviously national food security and regional food security. Because if you can imagine, you can produce 10,000 tons of protein using 3 to 4 hectares. Wow. You can produce 100,000 tons of protein using 10 hectares, which is considerably lower than what you would need for plant proteins. Yeah, and because of the low COGS, cost of goods, obviously this lends itself to be able to penetrate into the aquaculture industry, animal feed industry, and obviously pet food and food. Yeah.
Well, I know that your company has stated in the past that by 2030, we're already short of 10 million tons of protein in our food production system this year. And by 2030, I understand that's estimated to double to 20 million tonnes. And by 2050, when we'll have that larger population on the planet of 9 to 10 billion people, we're going to be 100 million tonnes short on protein. Is this what you're trying to address?
Exactly, yes. I mean, the protein demand supply gap, as you said, Roger, is increasing. We actually already see it in India, by the way. This is why one of the target markets we're focusing on is in India. But it's not only population growth. What is driving higher protein consumption or demand, I would say, is also income growth. So if you look at the economies over the past 30 years who have developed, protein, per capita protein consumption immediately goes up as your income moves up. Yeah. And that's also combined with population growth, creating this demand supply gap that ourselves plus other NGOs and the World Health Organization, the World Food Organization identifies will occur by 2050. Exactly. And that's why what we try to do with Protopia is not only ensure that we are satisfying, let's say, to produce for a country X, but to ensure that we can scale this. So we talk in terms of scale of about 10,000 tons to 100,000 tons per site, hence 10 to 11 hectares for a 100,000 ton facility. And the uniqueness of our proposition is our strain and process tech is simple and it's transferable, meaning you can produce this in India, Indonesia, China, Brazil, USA, because our strain is feedstock agnostic. What does that mean? That means in Brazil, it could use sugars, molasses, or ethanol. In India, it could use sugars, molasses, or ethanol. And in the US, you can either use corn syrup. In EU or Europe, you could use beet sugar, thick juice, molasses. And we developed a strain learning from, let's say, Veramaris, where the strain was very particular to a particular feedstock. In this occasion, we developed a strain which is what we call feedstock agnostic, which enables us to go global. And the process tech also, we ensured that it was simple and robust, which means that it is applicable for facilities which have fermentation without much retrofitting. So unlike other companies who design the facility or the site around the strain, we decided to focus more on the strain biology to be able to fit into different facilities, because there is a lot of idle fermentation capacity globally. So that's what makes us kind of unique. And because of that, we don't necessarily have to build, own, operate ourselves. We can actually license the technology and the strain to other strategic collaborators globally, hence fulfilling, their national requirements for single cell protein. Yeah.
Do you see that the investment that has to be made might be a limiting factor? I mean, you're talking fermentation. It's not an inexpensive operation. Do you expect some sort of support by whoever, that governments or United Nations or somebody to help develop those protein sources where they're needed?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would answer that is the following. From the private perspective, the facility can be modular. So in other words, you could build at 1,000 tons and then build it up as demand and traction grows. And that enables you then, from a private perspective, justify taking on debt and loans. That's one way. And we've looked at that with some of our strategic collaborators, right? And of course, what would happen then is you would build one type of facility which would then be replicated. A classic example here would be how the USA have built their ethanol facility and industry. One modular plant which then became replicated throughout the country. But that's all on the one side. The second side is obviously there are governments who are quite interested in dealing with national food security and are, I would say, considering matching. I wouldn't say 50-50, but there are indications that 35 to 40% matched with the 60% from private to facilitate this industrial growth and to actually kickstart, national food security or regional food security, I would say, ambitions. So I wouldn't say that governments are, I would say, negative towards this, actually quite positive. And in some cases, for example, in the Netherlands, even provincial governments are very positive on this and willing to match what private companies are willing to put in. So there is a bit of both. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking from those figures that I quoted, which come from DSM, by the way, that protein gap is coming upon us quite quickly. And as you say, we're already sort of seeing that gap reflected and the disadvantage within a country like India. So do you think the aqua or the livestock industry plays a significant role in the development of this and use of this protein?
I would say the following. First is we foresee growth of plant proteins and animal proteins over the next years. However, because of the population growth, as you mentioned, plus the income growth, we foresee this gap opening. So the question is, how are you going to feed not only the human population, but even the animal population with protein? At the moment, we're targeting to replace fish meal, for example, in aquaculture. So we can consider bringing this product into the salmonid industry, into the sea bass industry, and also shrimp industry, where we can actually replace fish meal. Now, our first trials with fish meal replacement was actually in carnivorous fish, in salmonids, because if we can prove it can replace fish meal in carnivorous fish, then we know it can translate into other types of fish. So that's where we've actually shown that Protopia can actually replace 100% of fish meal utilization in salmonid diets, which is a carnivorous diet. That then allowed us to build a platform and improve the product in terms of palatability to move then into the pet food sector. And we've done some, I would say, several independent kennel trials, both with dogs and cats of various ages, where we were able to show that Protopia actually had a higher preference rating, or palatability, I would say, for dogs and cats versus commercial diets. So that's why we basically started to talk to also the pet food industry to enable them to start testing our product in the in-house trials. So in answer to your question, I foresaw that Protopia can be one of the tools to mitigate the demand-supply gap that we foresee forthcoming in the next few years.
Yeah. So it's a step process, is it? Once you sort of prove its viability, I guess, and functionality in aqua and pet, we can see it moving into food sources, food protein added to food products, and ultimately help us address that that protein gap we've identified.
Partly correct, Roger. However, I have to say, right now we're working on all these channels. So we have product which has been, let's say, undergone further downstream processing, which is targeted for the food industry. As I mentioned, meat alternatives and dairy. We do some further downstream processing to improve the functionalities there. And then we've got downstream processing for both pet food and aqua, which is very similar. And there we're already obviously moving much faster. But food is not so far behind. We just are working very closely with certain customers. They want us to tailor the functionality. And once we've done that within the next 3 to 4 months, I can foresee that that will also open up as an industry for us. Yeah.
Well, just some practical questions. Is it a powder? Does it have a flavor? Does it have a sense? Can you explain the product a little bit more?
Sure. So first, it's a dry powder, yeah. And we can produce the dry powder as a spray dried powder or a granulate or a flake, depending on application. It has neutral smell, so it doesn't smell. And in terms of taste, and I talk more about the food sector here, it does not leave an aftertaste. It does not have grittiness, which is what plant proteins traditionally have. And I would say it also is not so overpowering like other plant proteins when it comes to taste. So it lends itself to a wider range of food items, but more importantly, because it has neutral taste and neutral smell, you can increase the inclusion level. Hence, supplement the food vehicle with a higher content of protein. And that's the key. Because it has low grittiness, very low smell, low taste, you can increase the inclusion level without interfering or affecting the original taste of the food item. Because that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So basically it's a dry powder. It's basically off-white. So it's a lovely off-white powder, no taste and no smell. And as I mentioned, it's non-GMO. And that's another critical thing for the food industry and also pet food industry, because regulations are quite strict on that front. And obviously labeling for the food industry is very important, because you want a label that the consumer can relate to. And the same for the pet parent. Pet parent looks on the bag of the feed. It's got to understand very quickly what's in my feed for my pets. Yeah.
And of course, pet parents particularly are interested in sustainability and all those environmental issues as well. Just quickly before we end, can you just quickly identify what the functionality is? What the percentage you mentioned earlier, the percentage of protein in the product, and the amino acid makeup? Just a couple of things that our viewers would be interested in.
Yeah. So we have a minimum protein level of 70%, and the rest is made up of fibers and vitamins and minerals. Which is and about 5 to 8% lipids, but 70%, minimum 70% protein. In terms of the amino acid, we've got the full amino acid profile for essential amino acids and structural amino acids. Plus, the PD-Cas, which is the food indicator for digestibility, is about 94 to 96%. And in the trials we've done for, let's say, salmonids, our digestibility index mirrors fish meal. So we tick a lot of boxes in terms of the value proposition of this particular product. And of course, as you mentioned, Roger, the key point is we can actually produce this at a very low carbon footprint. And our eventual ambition is to produce this product at less than 1 kilo carbon per kilogram protein. Yeah, that's the trajectory we're working towards.
Right.
Okay. So for those customers, both in the food sector and the animal feed sector, who are pressured on sustainability, particularly of input raw materials. That's why we're working on a low carbon footprint solution for them.
And that is based on a recycling or circular economy for the feedstock that you're using?
Exactly. So the way currently we are utilizing feedstock, you could say it's either orphaned molecules, surplus molecules, etc. But the eventual is we can actually produce methanol, ethanol, etc. from the combination of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Yeah, so we can actually have, let me go back one. If you have renewable energy driving an electrolyzer, you automatically produce hydrogen and oxygen. We utilize both. Now with the hydrogen, you can utilize that, and with carbon capture or biogenic carbon, combine the two, H2 plus CO2, and you can produce methanol. And as I mentioned, our strain is feedstock agnostic. So it can utilize these very low carbon alcohols and convert them into protein. And this is why we're focusing on India. Why? Because India actually has a surplus of ethanol. The latest indication was India is sitting on or has a surplus of about 10 billion liters of ethanol. We can utilize our strain to consume the ethanol and turn it into 70% protein. Hypothetically, if you utilize the whole lot, you'd probably end up with 560,000 tons of protein.
Right.
That would be enable you to feed 31 million people.
Wow. Yeah.
As a rough guess.
Yeah.
So in terms of impact, with regards to protein, scalability is there, COGS is there, and of course we've got to bring it to market next year.
Yeah.
That's still to be done.
Yeah.
So it's not a walk in the park, but it's doable. Let's put it this way.
Well, I think you've crossed the starting line. You have the product, you have the impact that is positive for what we're talking about as the industry goes forward, addressing, as I keep referring to, that protein gap, which is going to be all important the closer we get to 2050. And for my part, as a publisher of these magazines, I would be very interested in following this journey more closely. I think that we have to encourage not only our industry, but we have to talk wider about the benefits of this protein in particular, but these types of proteins that are alternative to what we've been using for decades or centuries. And I think that the world is becoming a very different place in terms of how we go about feeding ourselves. And I think what you're talking about is right at the forefront of that. So Karim, if there's anything else you'd like to mention that I've overlooked, I'm not saying that I've asked all the right questions here, but if there's anything you want to add, please volunteer it.
I think the most important point is whenever you're free, pop over to Delft in the Netherlands and have some of our burgers, chicken nuggets, cakes, snack bars made with Protopia. We actually had, I think 4 weeks ago, we actually had some celebrity chefs in The Hague utilizing our product to make cakes.
Okay.
Which were, I would say it was. I won't necessarily say they were the best assessed by the other taste panel members, but they certainly disappeared very fast.
And they're good for you.
Yeah, exactly. So Roger, whenever you're ready, just shout. We'll entertain you there.
I think even the name captures the imagination. Protopia points to utopia, but as I understand, Protopia, just as a word, is taking one step at a time and getting better tomorrow than we were yesterday. And I think you guys are headed in that direction. And we want to, as I said, follow that journey with you and report it to our readers and anybody else who's curious and wanting to know more about how the world's going to feed itself in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. And you're right. Protopia is a lot more pragmatic than utopia.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it sits better with us. But Karim, thank you very much for spending time with us today. And we look forward to hearing about your advances and particularly this launch coming up in beginning of 2027. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you very much, Roger. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Wasn't that fabulous? A great insight. And I think that we should take a note of this URL here and visit that site ourselves and find out more about Protopia and what it might mean to the way we provide food through our animal, vegetable protein sources, but also through our pet foods, etc. So we take a different route in the future as the way we look at single cell proteins. And I'm really pleased to have had this chance to interview Karim from DSM. But thank you for listening. See you next time. All the best. Bye for now.